My academic background has been in composition and creative writing. When I decided to go back to school to earn my doctorate, I made the decision to pursue education rather than English. The reasoning behind this is long and boring, but because of this switch in disciplines, it was required that I enroll in a qualitative research methods course. When I was told this, the only term I was familiar with was research. Throughout graduate school, it's a hallmark that most of our time is devoted to research. However, the research I was accustomed to doing was literary research. I would select a literary theory, usually one that agreed with my professor, and began analyzing a text. However, when I entered my qualitative research methods course for the first time, I learned quickly that qualitative research is much different than literary research. Being in the English field, I would build upon borrowed theoretical frameworks established in other disciplines, so some of the terminology and approaches were familiar. But this was a new way of understanding text. Instead of using a specific lens in which to view a piece of literature, I drew my conclusions based on what I observed. As Dinsen and Lincoln discussed in their 2005 The Sage Handbook of Qualitative Research, a qualitative researcher studies things in their natural setting, attempting to make sense of or interpret phenomena. With this in mind, I realized what great depth and breadth there is within qualitative research, and how I needed to rethink the term research. Our major assignment in my research methods course was to observe a public setting and to use the traditions of qualitative research as guidance. The main goal was to gain a better understanding of the research process by using qualitative data collection and analysis techniques. Having great interest in online education, I decided to study Second Life, a three-dimensional virtual world where users interact with each other through simulation avatars. So I logged on, created my persona, Ed Sweetwater, and became immersed within this digital environment. I walked around, observed the residents, and participated in their daily activities. I realized, as discussed by Hammersley and Atkinson in their 1995 book Ethnography, Principles and Practice, I was engaged in an ethnographic study where I assumed an emic perspective. However, what type of ethnographic study was the question? Finding a universal definition for ethnography, like qualitative research, is like having everyone agree on the definition of art. Was I performing a realist ethnography, characterized by Van Meenen's 1988 book Tales of the Field, where I give an objective account of the situation, or a critical ethnography, as discussed by Thomas's 1993 book Doing Critical Ethnography, where I advocate for marginalized groups? Or was I performing an ethnography that was a mixture of both? I was also poised with the idea of virtual ethnography discussed by Hine in her 2000 work Virtual Ethnography versus cyber ethnography as argued by Telly, Pisanu, and Haken in their 2007 article The Internet as a Library of People. To determine what type of ethnography, I had to re-examine and deconstruct Second Life, as well as the process of qualitative research. Launched in 2003, Second Life's environment contains general aspects of a metaverse, as described in Neil Stephenson's 1992 science fiction novel Snow Crash, where humans as avatars interact with each other in a three-dimensional space that uses the metaphor of the real world. The residents of Second Life are able to explore this virtual landscape, interact with other residents, participate in individual and group activities, as well as create and trade virtual property and services with one another. Because of the sophistication of this environment and misunderstanding of online communities, a mixture of both realist and critical approaches was warranted. Hine suggested that there are two ways of viewing the internet, as a culture and as a cultural artifact. These models provide structure for thinking about cyberspace. Defining the internet as a culture means examining social interactions and the construction of reality. Defining the internet as an artifact means understanding this space as a product of a society. But this is further complicated by the idea of cyberethnography. Telly, Pisanu, and Haken argued that the study of online groups and communities should account for human and non-human actors. This approach should be a hybrid of examining people as well as their interaction with technology. Once I became more immersed in Second Life, I began to understand that this digital community was both artifact and culture. The users bring with them the social constructs that they grew up with and have internalized. Therefore, race, gender, and other ways we define ourselves are present within this digital community. Yet along with understanding this cultural baggage, I also had to determine the society that is present in this space. I learned the cultural behaviors as well as social constructs that are present, and while there is a set culture, the degree this society exists and interacts is also dependent on the user's interaction with technology. After some thought, I decided to focus on the support people could receive in virtual communities for medical and psychological concerns, as well as the spiritual guidance that is provided. While I examined these digital communities within Second Life, I was bitten by a vampire twice, rode on a unicorn, prayed at a temple, and danced in several nightclubs. I also participated in yoga meditations, saw a drive-in movie, went to group therapies, and interviewed a variety of people in need of support. More importantly, however, I began to understand how meaningful this environment is to its users. Studying virtual cultures, however, raises complex questions that must be addressed by the qualitative researcher. Because avatars represent the users, knowing the participants' true age as well as their degree of autonomy or vulnerability is difficult to verify. Though the majority of the data collection for my study was from observations rather than direct engagement, this concern must still linger when studying participants in this or any virtual environment. This concern could be resolved, however, but not without altering the degree of risk to the participants and the classification of the study. Additionally, Second Life is seen by some as truly a second life, and as such have created personas within this community. Determining the validity of statements given might pose a considerable problem when drawing conclusions. Though the answers might be truthful from the resident's point of view, the information is not as accurate when associating it with the actual user. Though my experience with Second Life and learning qualitative research was new, it is not new to many people. The conclusions I made about ethnography, the internet, and online communities helped in my understanding of what it means to be a qualitative researcher, as well as what it means to do qualitative research. This process is murky, frustrating, taxing, humbling, and rewarding.